Everyone should be joining here now that I hit broadcast. All right, seeing some familiar names. Hello to all of you. Still filling up. All right, still loading up. Give a couple more minutes here.
I need to get some swag with
I know. I could do a Coke. They don't pay me for that. But,
I'm like, oh, what am I drinking out of today? Oh, it's
got
not
a Yeti
not
bottle here. Yep. Hey, we are proud. Not too long ago, we got Simple Numbers shirts. We do have Simple Numbers Yetis too, believe it or not. So we're
no
stepping
Yeti
up our
for
game.
You, though, Mike. No Yeti for you.
I do have one, but I drink other things out of that one at the house. So. All right, well, let's get started. Filled up a little bit, so let's just get it rolling. So let me share my screen here. Welcome, everyone. Simple Numbers Webinar Series, Episode 6, featuring Carr Brown of Lead Coverage and the man, the myth, the legend, Brandon Gray from our Simple Numbers Consulting team. This is going to be a unique one where typically we have focused on a presentation from clients, maybe highlighting something they do that could add value to obviously our clients and anyone watching. However, this is going to be one where it's going to be some of that, but at the same time, it's also going to be a case study session where Carr is going to go over her journey over these last several months and her overall journey with Brandon, really discussing and portraying how she has made a huge pivot in her business and how hopefully that can add some value to you all on the call. First of all, we're just playing out some key resources here. Lead coverage website, I'll put this all in the chat, our Simple Numbers website, and of course we have past webinars that you can take a look at as well. Please follow me on LinkedIn or sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date. We have Greg Crabtree's second book coming out soon, and I'll obviously put that out on blast and on LinkedIn and everywhere once that does, but it is at the printer and pretty much ready to go. So stay tuned for that. We're excited. I'm going to introduce Carr Brown. She is currently the Chief Revenue Officer at Lead Coverage, a B2B demand gen, sales, and PR consultancy specializing in supply chain, heavy industrial, and technology industries. Carr was one of the first employees at Echo Global Logistics, which grew quickly in 3 years, and her name is on the company's 2009 IPO press release. In 2017, after a successful corporate career, she partnered with Will Haraway and another industry veteran to start Lead Coverage. The company focuses on all pieces of the B2B conversion cycle: marketing, stack building, CRM automation, sales and marketing operations and enablement, inbound, outbound content, SEO, social conversion, PR, and measurement. Carr is also an active force in empowering women leaders. She's on the board of the Entrepreneurs Organization Atlanta chapter, Launchpad 2X, and co-founded Closer, community for women in sales. So with that being said, Carr, I will turn it over to you and you guys take it away. And by the way, I will interject with some questions in here to facilitate some additional conversation, but please go ahead with your presentation.
Mike, I don't have anything to say. You just did like the best intro ever.
Yeah, there you go. It's like I got it from somewhere.
I know, it's so weird, right? I actually wrote an intro for Launchpad 2X. So Launchpad is rocket fuel for female entrepreneurs. And I did a little ditty for them last night, and the intro was not at all humble because I was teaching the women in that group how to be more confident, which I don't have a problem with, but some of them do. So thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Like Mike said, we are a business-to-business lead gen shop. So we focus on everything that marketing does except for creative. So we do no pretty pictures. Everything we do is revolved around math. And so I've been a Simple Numbers client. I don't even know how long it's been, Brandon. 2 years? 2.5 years? Oh,
yeah, I think it was around 2.5, 3 years.
2.5 years-ish. And leading into the recession, like every other entrepreneur I knew, I lost all my hair in the month of April. It all grew back, thank goodness. But I lost like all this hair in the month of April with COVID and all the things that we were experiencing in March. And like Mike said, we started a whole new business. So my brother called in March and he was like, hey, big sister, I just got laid off. And I was like, oh my God, little brother, that's so weird. You sell fancy chin implants. I can't imagine why. And he's like, all right, just give me a job. So we did. So we put him back to work. We have always delivered leads to clients. So we've always said, excuse me, we've always said, hey, Mr. Customer, here are the 10 people that filled out the form. Here are the 25 people that came to your website, et cetera, et cetera. And then we said, you should go call them. And so my brother called and he was like, hey, I need to do something. I was like, you want to just like call these people for us? He's like, yeah. So he did. And it's been amazing. And we've been able to develop sort of a recurring revenue business, not sort of an actual recurring revenue business because of this ability to pivot in the middle of COVID. But could not have done that without the Crabtree, now CRI team. Specifically Brandon hounding my dupa, we call it dupa in our house, hounding my dupa to save as much cash as possible leading into the recession. So we were super, super fortunate that Brandon had been so aggressive about that. We were very well capitalized from a cash perspective, which then allowed us to go out and get just a boatload of debt. At a time when everyone else was sort of scrambling. We had already sort of been in that process, which was awesome. So I don't know if you want to comment on anything in that sort of story, Brandon. I know we were going to talk about sort of the intimacy with your revenue being super important for all things.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it was a great example of being prepared for when the opportunity presented itself. And so you kind of go back to, a year and a half, 2 years ago when we first started working with Carr and the team. And it really was trying to set in place of when you first start off a business, you're kind of saying yes to all things. We can take care of it. We can do it, and we'll figure out a way to make it profitable. And not to say that, you weren't profitable in doing that, but at the same time, you become a little scattered. And then you start to get clarity when you start looking at your metrics around labor efficiency and what particular service offering or product for some people that they offer is going to generate the highest gross margin for you. And then what type of labor cost is going to be involved in that. And that's really kind of the bread and butter that most of you guys that are on the call have heard us talk about. You hear us day in and day out really emphasize that direct labor efficiency metric, because for so many businesses, that is just the key driver. And so if you can provide enough inflow, enough volume of activity, control the gross margin, then if we can get that labor efficiency one kind of dialed in, and the times around, hey, yes, the team's running hot, I can tell you need to hire. And so we'd have a call with Karen, it's like 5 people we need to hire. Okay, next call, 5 people we need to hire. This change, this change, this changes. And that's rapid growth, but you always got those data points to tell you, hey, I'm running at record levels here. And I would ask her and say, hey, how's the team? And you've heard many of you have been in that same position. We're kind of tired. We're missing things. We're dropping the ball. Okay, now what's the most effective hire to make? Is it senior level? Is it mid-level? Is it junior level? And she did a great job of kind of staffing a team with those right balance of experience levels as well, so that we didn't see a setback when it came to labor efficiency. And so
Alan has a question. He wants you to clarify what was that opportunity that you took advantage of?
So it was when COVID hit, and so what Kara was telling is her brother calls and says, hey, I need something to do. And she's like, I've got a lot of things over here that we've been neglecting, for lack of a better word, maybe not paying as close of attention to as we should, for people who have shown some interest in what we as a company can do for them. And then it actually, opened up the window for other things beyond just her company. I'll let her fill you in on kind of how that worked. But that was the opportunity of whenever everything else and all the competitors were trying to figure out what are we going to do next, because if you guys have seen any of the data we track with our 100 company model, the month of April was brutal for marketing spend. I mean, it was just slashed. And you look at what Kara and her team were able to do, and they were able to maintain and increase. So that was, kind of what we're speaking of there.
Yeah, and I think to Alan's question, I think the key there for sort of a very specific for the simple numbers piece was that we had cash flow to cover the investment of those BD heads. So one of the things that we had done earlier, so this is pre-COVID, I had hired my first salesperson. So If you can't tell, I'm a natural salesperson, so I close all my own deals. But we had talked about, Brandon and I had talked about, hey, how do you can't multiply yourself, right? You can't scale yourself. So when are you going to make this investment? And it's going to affect your labor efficiency ratio for sure, hiring someone to do your own biz dev, right? Which is sort of a hard call for a lot of entrepreneurs. How do I train someone to tell my story, be me on the phone, find the right folks to come in the door, right? And we're a lead generation shop. So we didn't have a problem with leads. We still have a problem with leads. We always have a problem with your delivery, or how do you scale that? How do you do that? And so having understanding my numbers and being intimate with my revenue and understanding that we were going to be okay, right, through COVID. And that also has a little to do with the way that our business is structured from a contract perspective with our clients. But knowing that we had this cash in the bank and that we could afford to bring on a couple folks to make these clients and do this experiment in the middle of a pandemic was really scary. I mean, I'm not going to joke with you. Like, hiring 25 people in a pandemic and being like, hey, I think this is going to work. We're going to find some work for you guys and we're going to see if we can make this happen. It's pretty scary. And I'm sure it's even scary now for folks that maybe are in a tough spot. So one of the things that I talk a lot about with Brandon or my other coaches, I surround myself with all these people that are smarter than me. So lots of coaches. Actually, that was Brandon's call too. I'm giving you all the credit today, Brandon. Oh. Brandon said to me months and months ago, he said, all of our most successful small business owners have strategic coaches. So go get yourself a coach, which is another reason why I think we've been super successful through COVID, because this coach has allowed me to sort of stay eye on the prize. So long story short, knowing that we had the cash in the bank to make this investment in this pivot in COVID was really important to us. And I'm sure that there are folks today who are in a different spot, right? So if you're in hotels, if you're in cruise lines, right, airlines, these are all been really hit really hard. So understanding what is the pivot you could make to be able to capitalize on what is going on. It's as long as you know your numbers, like maybe you could make a small investment in something and see if it becomes something new.
So what did you, another question here. What did you set up to track it? How are you monitoring, like, hey, I'm going to hire all these employees. This is going to work. How are we measuring this success?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you asked. So let me tell you what we do for a living. So we are a HubSpot Platinum partner. So in addition to being a CRI customer, we are also very deep into the HubSpot ecosystem. So we've been a HubSpot CRM user since 2011-ish, which is a really long time. And so we are hyper specific in terms of how we track activity, revenue, activity to revenue, human beings to revenue, opportunities to revenue. We track as much as Brandon tracks my revenue from a holistic perspective, right, in terms of closed revenue. Brandon only gets to see the stuff that actually closes. There's a boatload of stuff that's in the pipeline. And so we have a combination of the HubSpot work that's coming in and then using Brandon and the CRI team to help us in QuickBooks and putting that all together. So to answer Alan's question, we use HubSpot. We like it. It's almost free, if not free. And it lets us do both sales and marketing in one engine, which is really nice.
Brandon, that gives me a question here. I mean, I sort of know the answer to it, but when you're working with a client that's going to make a pivot in their business, and they're looking at different, whether it's making a full pivot of offering another service, whether it's scaling back one to a lesser and bringing another one involved. From an analysis perspective, how do you assist them in that? What should they be aware of in that process?
So there's actually two things you got to keep in mind. And so one is going to be, what does that activity look like financially? And so mapping out the financial performance and, just going, say, next 3-4 months, what do we expect to add in revenue and gross margin? Here are the labor costs we would have to add. And by the way, that labor may not be 100% effective from day one. And so we may be a little heavy in terms of what that labor would look like until they get fully utilized. What are the, as you build that out, then looking at the administrative and overhead cost increases that we're going to experience in doing that. And then you kind of can forecast your net income. Well, that's one component. That's where it's tempting to stop there and you look at it and kind of go, all right, yeah, by month 6, we're going to be, we're going to be in positive net income. But the other one is you got to look at this concept of what we call launch capital, which is the amount of capital you're going to burn until this becomes cash flow positive. And so depending upon the business model that you have, it may be one in which people prepay for services or give you a deposit for services. Well, you're going to have much less of a capital outlay, and we can forecast out what that would look like. It could be one to where you don't prepay, but you get to invoice them at the very beginning of the month for that month's work. And most folks pay ACH or credit card. And so you've got a very small turnaround within the first week of the month. Usually you've got the cash. So now I can fund that. And then there's the for those who have services or what have you, I'll speak to inventory in just a second. But if you're a service-based business that provides the service and then bills and then waits 30 days to get paid and then waits another 15 for them to actually cut the check because it's always in the mail, what does the cash flow implication look like for that? And so you kind of model those things out and you go, first, does it pass the sniff test in terms of what the launch capital I'm going to deploy? Am I going to be able to recover that with at least a 50% return? And then the second thing is going to be, do I have enough capital in place now to make that growth investment, or do I need to go acquire some additional capital? And for those people who've met their core capital requirements, a lot of times you've got enough between that. And then in this case, timing was really good too, because things like PPP becomes available and the SBA loans are available for some folks in those cases. It allows you an opportunity to acquire some capital that you may not have otherwise been able to get. And there's a third component to that for those of you guys who carry inventory. And so this is the one that you got to really be careful of, is the folks who give terms and also carry inventory, because you're going to have the most expensive launch capital requirement because you've got to cash flow substantial amount of cash until you get back to cash flow positive. By the time you finance the receivable and you pay for the inventory, depending upon the terms your vendors give you, we got to map all that out. And if you go out to our simplenumbers.me site, we've got some crisis planning tools out there that will help you go through that process as well, that we were looking at it with people as, in particular, as COVID hit, but it applies to any time you're trying to relaunch activity or take on new activity.
I think one of the things that was really helpful for us was Brandon gave us the advice specifically on putting the biz dev reps back to work at the beginning of COVID, was we did all that prepaid. So our normal sort of course of doing business is the horror story that Brandon just shared, which is set them up on a retainer, charge them monthly for the work you're currently doing, and then wait for them to pay, which is, sort of the nature of being consultants, and it is what it is. But for the new business that we started, we kicked it off with prepaid, which just made the whole situation so much more palatable for me as an owner. And also from a cash flow perspective, right? We can look at the books and say we know exactly how much labor we're going to need because it's already prepaid. It also forced us internally to get a lot more buttoned up, if you will, about like hour burn. So it's really easy in a business services environment to burn hours that you're not billing for, or have extra admin time, or like do extra work to make a client happy. Totally different situation when you're prepaid, right? They paid you $10,000. You're going to do $10,000 worth of work and probably not $1 extra because you're not sure if the next 10's coming in. So it materially changed our business, and it actually made us more aware of our burn, which gave us a lot more sort of, we were more aware of how much burn was impacting our bottom line beyond just sort of the monthly P&L, but the weekly sort of, hey, we're really burning over on some of these clients that we didn't really think about. So it's materially changed our business beyond just COVID.
Great. So you say, one of the topic of the webinar is revenue intimacy is key to recovery. So elaborate on that statement, revenue intimacy. What does that mean to you?
Oh, I love it so much.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Even when I was typing it out, I'm like, I hope she can explain it better than me.
So like I said, I'm a salesperson, and I think shock value is a great way to get people to show up to something. Use the word intimacy in an email. Number one, it will go to spam. So like, just be careful. But number two, people will show up, right? So I stole this from my friends at GrowthX. They're a Silicon Valley based venture firm that also does a lot of good stuff we do in terms of like marketing and sales support for startups. We don't do startups, but we do mid-market shops. And really what we talk about when we talk about getting intimate with your revenue is really understanding where it's coming from. So like I said before, Brandon and the CRI team see the end of the month, right? They see, it is what it is. It's just the nature of the business. They don't see what's happening at the front end of the month or what you're expecting. You can tell them, right, what you think is coming. But a lot of times, if you're like me, up until COVID, I was like, well, I don't know, guys, like this feels good, right? And like, you don't really, like, you've no idea, right? So one of the things that we've gotten so much more sophisticated at during COVID is getting really intimate with our pipeline. Percentages to close, how like, do we really think this is going to come in? And then what's really sad, but it is what it is, how many of these businesses that we're working for are going to stay solvent, right? And then one of the things that Brandon has hammered home for me over the last 2 years is DSO, right? So the first thing we did when COVID hit was go and collect everything we were owed. And still sort of working on that DSO sophistication and making sure that we're really, really intimate with what's coming in and what's going out, right? So what's coming in and what's not coming in. And so as a business owner, especially as a consultant, people sort of eventually pay, right? Like maybe they're, 45 days over, or 60 days over. And I used to not really think about it too much. And Brandon and other things Brandon would harp on me every month is, what is going on with this DSO, Kara? This is unacceptable, right? 94 days is way too long. And so we got our DSO down to a point that is manageable for us for business. So when I talk about being intimate with your revenue, I am a salesperson, I'm a marketer, right? So spending a lot of time in spreadsheets around money, which is not my thing. I really like math, but I like marketing math. So I like conversion metrics, and I like email opens, and show me how social is contributing to the overall, pipeline, things like that for clients. And I hadn't spent a lot of time really getting intimate with my own revenue. And I think spending time every quarter with the CRI team is really important, but also now spending time every month, what do we think is really going to close, which is a HubSpot function, and then what is actually closed, which is clearly an accounting function, has been super, super important to us. And it's boring. It's not that fun, but it's become so important, especially now during COVID.
You mentioned on our call that scaling for the sake of scaling is hard. It's a lot of S's in there. And tell me a little bit about your experience. We get some clients or some people call us like, hey, I want to light the rocket fuse and just scale, right? I mean, take us through that journey in terms of saying, hey, here's where we're at right now at 0, but now we're about to beef this thing up. I mean, what did you elaborate more on that statement for me?
Yeah, happy to. So we're business services, so totally different if you have products or are retail or doing something that involves actual products. But for us, scaling meant human capital. It means bodies. And it means, for us, it meant going vertical and getting really, really, really specific on the verticals that we're going to service. So we decided, a million years ago, 2012, I was the 12th employee at a company called Echo Global Logistics. It grew 3,000% in 3 years, and my name is on that IPO press release. So when I walk into a meeting with a logistics company or supply chain management company, I sort of have this immediate credibility. My business partner, Will Haraway, comes from Manhattan and Associates. Same idea, very transportation specific. So we went super deep in the transportation vertical, which I highly recommend. It's really hard during COVID. I think people are sort of picking up whatever they can grab, which I totally understand. But we have been able to go super deep into a vertical and go up market in that vertical because there's no one else that's doing lead generation and marketing services for supply chain management companies specifically. And so that's been super, super helpful in terms of scaling. That's one. I think the second piece that's really important for scaling is making the investments before you're really comfortable making the investment, right? So I made an investment in our salesperson. She's amazing. With a huge pipeline. We now know we do not have a lead problem. We have a delivery problem, and then I can't hire enough people fast enough to get the work done. But different problem. If you want to come work for me, let me know. But the first problem is the one that most entrepreneurs sort of deal with, right? I think that for the most part of the friends that I've met, actually, funny story, I'm sure you're both aware of EOS. So EOS is the entrepreneur operating system. A lot of people use it. We don't. But I'm standing around at a cocktail party one day with two bearded white tech guys. No surprise. This is the story of my life. And they're like, hey, Kara, we're going to implement EOS as a team. Like, so 3 entrepreneurs, right? Would you like to be in our pod to like implement EOS together? And I said, you guys, yes. Like, I've been thinking about EOS. And I have this huge problem. I have so many new clients to onboard. Like, I got to hire people and onboard these clients and build these clients. It's a huge pain in the butt, like having to do all this work. And I finished my sentence and the room sort of went quiet. And they were like, oh yeah, Kara, yeah, that's my problem too. Oh my gosh, I have so much work. I can't possibly handle it. And I was like, oh, that's not your problem. Okay, cool. Maybe we shouldn't be in the same EOS group. So we've always had a little bit of a different problem, but I think the biggest one for me in terms of scaling has always been hiring ahead of the closed business. And like Brandon said, making the investments in the people so that we can get them up and trained and ready to go before the clients come on. That's been the biggest challenge for us. And then the real challenge for me was hiring a salesperson. So we hired this amazing salesperson who's Amber. She's great. And we didn't let her sell for like 3 months because I was not ready to like let her sort of like give her the reins, right? It took me a while to sort of like let go. And so long story short, she's crushing it now with this massive pipeline. She's doing great. But that's for me, the biggest issue with scaling was trusting in someone else to do my job, essentially, stuff that I love, and then hiring the people before we really needed them. Like trusting in the process, I think. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. And Brandon, I mean, you've worked with, hundreds of companies over the years. Tell me what is the danger? I mean, we see the benefits. I mean, Kara was in a great spot, had the cash to do, which I think is a main point in all this in terms of getting that core capital. But talk about that with some of the dangers of, hey, I'm going to bring these people in. I'm going to make that, catalytic spend of adding all this labor. We got to have the work to do it. What dangers do they run in there? And specifically what I'm talking about is, hey, can they get to that optimal LER fast enough or billable target fast enough?
Yeah, well, there's a handful of things. Obviously, the biggest one is going to be, I'm taking a little bit of exposure, as we refer to it as I'm hiring ahead of the curve. Do I have the capital or access to capital to support that should things not go according to plan? And so the sales one is a good example of, many of you heard me tell the story about, 2017, 2018, when everybody wanted to hire salespeople. And it was, hey, I found the salesperson who can knock it out of the ballpark. They're more experienced than I was originally expecting and looking for, but they have this great list of contacts. And by the way, they're going to cost a little bit more. Well, what happens whenever instead of it taking them 3 months to get ramped up, it takes 9? Because that sales position is supposed to be paying for themselves. So we got to make sure we got the pockets to be able to afford that type of hire. And then secondly, as I was mentioning earlier, as you look at the other accompanying expenses, well, I'm picking on salespeople here, but what are salespeople going to want? They're going to want leads. Okay. Can I experiment with marketing and perhaps slip and fall and scrape my knee along the way and spend some dollars there to get the leads? And by the way, once we have the leads, now we got to hire people. It might take them a couple of months to get trained and up to speed. Do I have the capital to pay for that? And so it's, you got to make sure you got the cash, or am I willing to take the risk of I might have to pull in a line of credit, or I might have to put money into the company, or I might have to go without compensation as the entrepreneur to make this thing work. And so, you want to plan it out as best as possible, but then have some additional, you guys have seen me do this before. I will kind of look at it and say, all right, it's going to take $50,000, $100,000, say 100. You need to have 200 available, because it's going to take twice. It's like building a house. It's going to take twice as long. It costs twice as much.
He's such a buzzkill on calls, Mike. I'm like, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. And he's like, no, you're not. You don't know. You're not going to do that.
The other thing is, how quickly can you develop talent? And a lot of you heard me say this. I think this is one of the last great untapped competitive advantages. Can you take somebody, and instead of it taking 6 months to get them up to speed to deliver on your service or product, can you do it in 3? Because the shop down the road is taking them 6. And if you can turn it quicker, not only does it improve the service that I'm giving the end user, but at the same time, it allows me to leverage that labor much quicker. And if you look at kind of the labor market right now, what is the one group that no one is hiring? Well, it's new college grads. They've went from people beating down their doors in December saying, hey, we're growing really quickly. I've got to have somebody. Do you want to start? You graduated in May. Great. Can you start work in June? And then they got the call in the middle of March that said, hey, hang on to that thought. And they're sitting around looking for things to do. And so most folks are reluctant to hire that group because why? They don't know what they don't know. But if you can find out, and I had a client did a phenomenal job of what I'd call a glorified internship with some of them. And he just cut to the chase. Hey, we're in unprecedented times. The role doesn't look like it used to look. I'm going to take a chance on you being right out of college and see how quick you can learn. If you'll take a chance on me, and we'll make it worth your while as we get through this together over the next 6 to 12 months. But get creative on the type of people you're looking for and how quickly can I train them. And I think that's a real key there as you're looking to scale.
Carr, I got a couple of questions for you from the chat. How did you find a good salesperson?
Bah, if I told you that, I wouldn't have a job. No, I'm kidding. Happy to share. So I'm a salesperson, and so I sort of just looked for someone who looked like me, right? We also use Crystal Knows. So there is a very, very creepy tool called Crystal Knows. So like crystal ball knows. And if you decide to buy it, put my name in a little referral thing, because I think I get like $4 for one who buys it. But anyway, Crystal Knows is an AI machine-based learning tool that sits inside your LinkedIn profile. And when you go to look at someone on LinkedIn, you hit this little magic button and it pops up their personality profile. It is the creepiest thing you've ever seen. But it works. It works like a charm. We actually hired a young person out of college, and she populated in her Crystal Knows profile as a C, which is like a counselor type person. It's like a community builder. I'm a high DI, like I'm a driver, salesperson all day long, and she's sort of the opposite of me. And in her Crystal Knows profile, it says, I like that. Is that salesperson agency? Yes, this is like, I'm giving you all the goods right now. So we do this for clients too. So when we're going to go pitch to a new client, we will check out the Crystal Knows profile, because if you're dealing with a skeptic, you need to pitch them very differently than if you're dealing with someone who is an analyst or a driver, right? And Crystal Knows actually tells you, like, do not use words longer than 2 syllables. So we hired this person, and she was a community builder, and it said, do not leave this person alone for long periods of time. She will get into trouble. Like, it actually said that on the Crystal Knows profile. And then when we hired her, she said, hey, by the way, I can't be left alone for more than a couple hours because I get distracted. And I was like, I knew that for sure. So for salespeople, you're looking for high DIs, right? And you're looking for folks that have, now another thing that that not salespeople have a problem with is that salespeople do have no attention to detail, right? So just sort of assume that, right? That they are high drivers, they are high instigators, but they will very likely not have a great attention to detail. And so don't expect them to do things that have a high attention to detail, right? Like your salesperson, which is probably why I needed Brandon with a megaphone in my ear for 2 years, telling me exactly what to do, because I'm a salesperson. So Brandon said, DSO, cash flow. And I was like, yes, sir, I can do what I'm told, right? And so it worked really well because I didn't think about it too much because I was off selling things. So to answer the question, we use Crystal Knows, we use profile, we use any sort of profiling that we can use. The other thing about hiring salespeople is that they're salespeople. So they are going to sell you on them, even if they're not the right fit. And so it's really important to make sure you know who you're hiring. Another tidbit that is relatively sort of associated with COVID is what we're seeing in the marketplace right now is old school sales guys. And I'm just going to say this because my dad is an old school sales guy and I love him. But teaching old dogs new tricks is really hard. And so the idea of hiring someone in COVID who has always sold in person and expecting this person to be able to sell digitally, you will be disappointed. So I wrote a blog post a long time ago that early on in COVID that said the inside sales rep is the MVP of COVID. Because if you can close a $200,000 to $400,000 deal without ever seeing someone in person, that's a skill. It's an actual skill. And there are not that many people that can do it without seeing someone in person, right? And so that is something that if I were hiring salespeople today, I would be looking for that. I'd be looking for that skill set. So tell me what are the last 3 deals you've done virtually? And if a salesperson can't tell you that, or if they dance around it, then they're probably not the right person. Mike, I could do a whole webinar on how to hire salespeople.
I guess we'll have to just have part 2, and yeah. Alan will name it salesperson intimacy just for you.
I like that.
Alan will show up. We got another question here. As a healthcare business CEO, problem number 1 is not sales lead generation, but having the right number and type of people to do the job. How does Carr identify the right talent with right attitude in the interview process?
Yeah, amen. So same thing Crystal knows. Also, this is funny because I just printed it out yesterday. So last night I was on a call with the woman who started Canva, Melanie. I forgot her last name. Sorry. So she started Canva. It's now a $6 billion with a B dollar company out of Australia. And she was giving some feedback to a venture group I'm a part of. And her feedback was these guys. It's called Top Grading 101. This is Brad Smart. I'm happy to send this email out to whoever wants it. There's like a little ebook that they did, and then there's an actual full book on how to hire people. And what I've taken out of it so far, Mike, this is just in the last literally 12 hours, because this is our biggest issue, is hiring and like hiring the right people and getting them in as fast as possible and getting them trained up, to Brandon's point. And training people on your processes and how you want things done virtually is really, really hard. So I am not pretending to be an expert on how to do that. We've hired 4 people. In addition to the sales reps we've hired 4 consultants since COVID started, and getting those people up and running and the way that we like things done it's been really difficult. We did start doing a once a month in-person sort of mini retreat. So we tell everyone that what day we're gonna meet, and then we all take our temperatures, my thermometer, every morning for 7 days before we get together. So we're all safe from COVID. And we get together once a month and sort of go through like the way that we do things at our company. But go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, Ed just shot a question and just said top grading as a top grading for sales book as well. So I'm just
great, perfect. So Ed knows more about it than I do. So far in the last 12 hours, what I've learned from the top grading and the Who book, which is the book that goes with it, is it just requires time and attention. Like that's what I've sort of taken from this so far, is that I spend, actually I have a friend of mine that says like what you put energy into, you will manifest. And so it seems like if you put real time and attention into building your mission for this person, building their actual individual contributed like the things they need to do, instead of just sort of whipping together a job description and finding some random people that you think will fill that job. I'm also a terrible judge of character because I'm a salesperson. So like, hey, Brandon, it's nice to meet you. And Brandon's delightful and charming. And I'm like, great, come work for me. Brandon's like, I'm a CPA. I have no business writing email copy. And I'm like, what do you mean? You're going to be great. It's going to be awesome, Brandon. Give it a shot. And then it doesn't work. And I'm so shocked. So, but learning as we go, I think it's important to learn as we go and to pay attention to the things that are going to make the biggest impact in your business.
On the training in a digital environment, obviously, the more that you can standardize, videos become really important. But the thing that we've seen and experienced that gives all the training teeth is testing. And so how much of what you're providing in services and what have you, can you put testing behind to check and make sure that you're teaching it appropriately? And that's what we tell our team. It's not about, did you comprehend it? Now, if you fail the test 4 times in a row, there's probably a comprehension problem. But I'll give you the first one on me that I probably didn't teach it very well. And so as you watch videos and as we do, checks and what have you, how much of it, have testing in place that where you can measure what is actually being observed. And that's been a takeaway for us, at least.
I've always been really impressed with, like, no matter who I talk to on the Crabtree team, you all say exactly the same thing, exactly the same way. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to. It's like, no, this is the way we do this here.
That's because in our other building, we all had to sit in the corner with Greg, and they're just like, you come out of there just saying the exact same things. I'm at home with my wife. I'm at home with my wife using Greg phrases, and it's
you cannot take it home. It does not work at home. I can attest to that.
Yeah. Yep.
So we have something similar. When I pitch, my pitch is always the same, and we actually had a bingo card. Someone drew a bingo card up of like the highlights of our pitch and like the things that we say, which is hilarious. And I think, part of it is once you figure out something that works, don't deviate, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, stick with what sort of works, right? But I've taken a lot away from our calls with you guys in terms of building processes around exactly what you guys do, and it never changes. And actually, the last time I got on the phone, I brought my coach with me, and poor Jack. So Brandon let Jack hang out to dry, right? So poor Jack, so sweet, such a nice guy, gets on the phone with my coach, and my coach is like, I don't want it this way. I want it this way. And Jack's like, yeah, no, like, we don't, that's that. And he's like, I want a budget, and I want to see it this way. And Jack's like, you can do whatever you want, man, but like, that's not the way we do it here, which is really great. And a testament, I think, to the process and following the process that your whole team is really bound to, which is cool.
So one of the things, on the revenue side, a lot of people, to some people, it's just like, hey, I got revenue, right? And so explain to us the makeup of yours. Did you ditch lower margin for high margin? Is it well diversified? Or I think read one of our capital advisor groups did a presentation, and they said they didn't no more than 15% of your revenue coming from one client. How does the makeup of that look like as you were building this out and really paying attention to that revenue?
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't mention that when we talked about revenue intimacy. So we are pretty well diversified from a client perspective. So we definitely don't have a client that makes up more than 15%, maybe less, more than 10% of our total revenue. We've tried to add different revenue streams different times, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. I think the most important thing is to make sure that you are trying new stuff all the time, right? And then we've done a really good job of sort of the land and expand. So getting into a client, we have a $10,000 month minimum, 12-month retainer. So sort of like 120K is baseline. So what can we do? And the team has been started to be trained on this in terms of what can we do to increase that. So in 2021, we're implementing a bonus plan. My first one, pat yourself on back, right?
Does Brandon know this? Brandon, you know that?
He doesn't. Not yet. Okay. It's coming. I got a whole quarter to figure it out before I tell him. But I have enough cash, I can handle it. So the sort of matrix of, and in business services, this is really hard, the matrix of GM and customer satisfaction. So Brandon does ask me like, hey, how are the customers? What's happening? Do you know who's going to leave? Do you know who's staying, et cetera, et cetera? And we had never really done customer satisfaction scores. They're really hard to do in business services. This is not an easy thing to accomplish. It's awkward for account managers to say to their clients, like, hey, scale of 1 to 10, how did I do today? Like, it's just a weird thing. So we got a tool, and the tool is sending basically an NPS score, scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And then a text box, like, what's the one thing we could do better? And I'm very proud to report that our first set of CSAT was a 9.58, so super happy about that. And so continuing to move towards that customer satisfaction and then GM, right? So Brandon would be very proud. We've had 2 in-person meetings since COVID. And at both of those in-person meetings, I walked my team through the difference between GM and profit because I needed them to understand, like, hey, it's your job to manage to this GM number. So being intimate with the revenue has also included us down 2 levels, actually, right? So it's me and my senior team, senior team, and then down to like this next account manager level are responsible for managing to margin. And it takes a sophisticated billing hourly rate, sort of process of a bunch of different softwares to pull all that together to make sure that your team, not just your CEO, but your team is really looking at GM per client, which can be hard. It's a hard thing to manage. It's a hard thing to measure. And it's sort of a more sophisticated model, but it gets us more intimate with our revenue, clearly. And then also it lets us sort of predict, do a better job of predicting labor. So if we know for a $10,000 account, we need 1.2 people per every new client we bring on board, how often do we need to hire new people? So what does the pipeline look like versus how many we're going to hire, right? So you can sort of do all the modeling based on that. But if 2 years ago, we weren't even close, like we weren't anywhere close to this stuff. So it's been cool to sort of be on that journey and learn this as we go along. It's really fun.
Brandon, what are your thoughts on when we talk about that? I've had many conversations with clients about, oh, hey, gotta really look and see what my customers are and see what kind of margin we're getting off of them. But then and that's great, and we definitely want that. But then there's the argument of, hey, we can't cut everybody. I mean, what if 50% of them are below, right? I mean, we just can't get rid of all of them. I mean, and for the sake of that, so what do you say to that piece where it's, it's not lose all your customers just for the sake of some high margin ones, but is there wiggle room in there, or do you just have to come with a different approach?
Yeah, well, you got to kind of take it on a case by case basis because each company is going to be a little bit different. And so if you've got a large amount of client inflow, then I'm more motivated perhaps to take larger swings and reductions as you start to rank those gross margin dollars, and then you can take it a step further and actually rank labor efficiency with them, and you look at the total. And so you kind of can look and say, hey, these are the folks below the Mendoza line. I got to get them up. So are they not up because of something I'm doing? Meaning I'm spending, Carr mentioned it's $10,000 a month and you're spending $15,000 on them. Well, they may not be asking for that. You're just over delivering. Well, that makes them like you, but is that a viable financial model? So I got to look and see, am I causing it? And if so, how do I, sometimes it's hard to, as Greg would say, put the cow, back in the barn once you left the gate open. You just can't do that. I knew Alan would appreciate a farm reference there. And so,
so Alabama.
Anyway, you look at that ranking, and so if I've got pretty good inflow, then I'm more apt to be aggressive in attacking that. And it's a difficult conversation whenever it comes up, depending upon your frequency. If you're providing it in a contracted setting, of hey, we're behind the change here, and this is what it's got to work for it to be mutually beneficial for both of us. I had a MSP provider several years ago. We went through that exercise, and we did red, yellow, green, and we worked on the red first. And then, and 9 months later, they'd kind of cleaned out most of the red, and we had some yellow. Okay, let's work on the yellow next. And you just kind of move into it over time. Now, if lead flow looks really bad, then I'm kind of standing back and going, all right, I don't want to cut my nose to spite my face. So are we underwater with these relationships? And if so, if I reduce them, I've got to reduce a corresponding cost somewhere to make up for that. So do you have at least positive contribution from the relationship? And that's a little, like I said, a little different situation as to how aggressive you're going to be in attacking that. So the only caveat there would be is if it is strictly not a cultural fit for that client and your organization. And so if they're abusing your team or being unfair to your team or something like that, yeah, you gotta, it doesn't really matter what the margin looks like.
We've been there. We had a client ask one of my female staff members if they could advertise on a pornography site. Literally, like, and they weren't joking. The next call was, "Hey, it's over. Like, I don't care how much money I'm making off of you guys. This is just not a fit for us, you know." Yep. So, I'm with you on that one.
So, hey, real quick, Kara, before I'd definitely like you to focus a little bit on talking about your passion, with empowering women leaders.
All the ladies, look at all my ladies back here.
Yeah, I know. If I did that, people would be like, "Hey, man, what are you doing?"
You could look like you could take some effort. You don't have to look like you're in jail, by the way.
I got 3 daughters, so I'll just throw their pictures out. It'll be good.
The next webinar, Mike's like in the tea room, and it's like pink and clothes behind him.
That's right. Lots of pink in my house. Real quick though, anything else you want to say before you transition to that?
No, this was so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, we enjoyed it. But yeah, please take the floor with that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so really quick, a little shout out to all my ladies out there. Less than 2% of female founders will break $1 million in revenue. So I'm on a mission to help all women sort of break that glass ceiling, which is amazing. And we're doing it. Part of a group called Launchpad 2X. Launchpad helps women go from sort of founder to CEO, which has been an incredible experience for me. And 25% of the women who graduate from the Launchpad 2X program will break $1 million in revenue. So huge fan of all things women and women empowerment and all the things that we can do to help women in business become stronger, better business women. And I think it's been super helpful to be a CRI Crabtree customer, because I remember when Greg first came to EO Atlanta and I first got exposed to the labor efficiency ratio, and I like blew my mind. And I was like, what is this thing and why haven't I been using it? And so it's been really nice to have a team that sort of brings it back home every time we get on the phone, right? And Brandon sort of pounding into me BSO and cash, and being able to get back to you all. So thanks for having me on today, but also just knowing that like your back is covered, and that that if you do salute and say, "Yes, sir, Brandon, sir, I'll do what I'm told," that it actually does work, which is nice when you get good advice. So appreciate that. But yeah, super happy customer, happy to help anyone from a lead gen perspective too. Happy to just hop on the phone and talk about marketing and sales that we do all day, every day, specifically for business to business. And also HubSpot. If you're a HubSpot customer and you just want to like knock some ideas around, you're not using it because you think you could, or want some new ideas on things to sort of jazz up the supply chain, jazz up the lead gen engine, let us know.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. We're definitely going to probably have a sales intimacy webinar coming up.
I love it.
We're just going to roll with that name just right now, so everyone be ready. But Kara, really appreciate it, Brandon. See you in 2 seconds when you walk out of that room over there. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
The other jail cell.
That's right. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for attending. I'll put this recording out and blast it to all the people that couldn't make it as well. Everyone, take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.